Welcome to Paint Shop Pro 2021 Fundamentals. My name is Len Nassman, and this is the latest in my series of instructional materials for helping people get started with Paint Shop Pro. My YouTube videos for Paint Shop Pro 2018 and 2019 have been viewed by tens of thousands of viewers, and the favorable comments about my approach to learning how to use the program has encouraged me to update my materials to the 2021 version of the program. I've been using Paint Shop Pro since the JASC version 4. That's more than 30 years ago, and the program is still my favorite for creating basic designs, signs, posters, capturing and modifying images for use in desktop publishing documents and newsletters. I also use Paint Shop Pro to capture images, crop them, modify them, and insert them into email messages. I also use Paint Shop Pro to enhance my digital photographs. Some of the old family album photos have been scanned and then cleaned up and enhanced and modified using Paint Shop Pro. I also use Paint Shop Pro for my digital photography work. I've taken some of my favorite pictures, cropped them, enhanced them, and resized them to 1920 by 1080 format. The 1920 by 1080 format is useful for backgrounds, wallpaper on my desktops, screensavers, and slideshows. For many years I've been using Paint Shop Pro almost on a daily basis. Paint Shop Pro remains my favorite tool in my computer toolkit. The Paint Shop Pro 2021 Fundamentals video series closely follows the contents of the book that's available by scrolling down on the YouTube video page. The Paint Shop Pro 2021 Fundamentals book contains detailed step-by-step instructions on how to create the various projects illustrated by the videos. Paint Shop Pro 2021 is a very powerful image processing and paint program. Although it has most of the common features of the much more expensive Adobe Photoshop, many users find Paint Shop Pro 2021 much easier to learn. This tutorial will focus on some commonly used features of Paint Shop Pro 2021. Many of the features covered are also common to earlier versions of Paint Shop Pro. In the earliest versions of Paint Shop Pro, the focus was on creating drawings. As the program evolved, it gravitated towards modifying and enhancing photo images. However, all of the core drawing tools remain. Part 1 focuses on using Paint Shop Pro for drawing and includes the basics of the interface. Part 2 covers enhancing photos. It includes cropping images, adding picture frames, resizing images, enhancing them, and many of the image enhancing tools. Part 3 focuses on printing. Paint Shop Pro provides a variety of tools to help with printing. You can print a single image sized to fit a page or scaled to a specified size, and there are templates available for printing multiple images on a page. Part 4 in this video series covers creating a custom toolbar and workspace. If you're a frequent user of Paint Shop Pro, you'll probably want to create the custom toolbar with your favorite tools, and you'll also want to create your personal workspaces. Well, it's time to get started now with Paint Shop Pro and look into the user interface. As a point of reference, I'm using Paint Shop Pro 2021 Ultimate installation. At the time of this recording, Corel was offering 3 versions of Paint Shop Pro 2021. The basic version, the Ultimate version, and the video bundle version. The Ultimate version includes the Creative Collection, which provides some additional paint brushes, picture frames, and things that you'll see as we proceed through the tutorial. The Paint Shop Pro welcome screen has 3 tabs. It has a Manage tab, an Edit tab, and this little house, which is the Home tab. If you don't see the same welcome screen, you should click on the Home tab. The very first time you'll be using the program, however, it will open up to the Home tab. There's another difference between what you see on my display and what might be on your display. If I select View, Workspace Color, you can see that I have 3 choices here, and I've selected the light gray option. There's a column of choices here on the left side, and we'll really use the Get Started choice, but let's take a look at what's on these other pages. What's new includes a number of things, some videos to describe some of the things that are available from Corel. The Learn page provides access to a bunch of different tutorials that you may want to look at. The Store page gives you a list of Corel products you may want to order. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to toggle on the Creative Content option, and then when I scroll all the way down, you'll see there are a couple of free options here, and I encourage you, if you haven't done so, to go in and download and install the Creative Content option. It's gone from my list because I've already done that. There are seasonal savings available, and there's an optional Ultimate Script Bundle for a modest price. These options here are links that may change on your installation. Let's go back and explore the Get Started page. Notice that there are several different available workspaces. There's one designed primarily for photo editing. There's one that's called Essentials, and that's for beginners who want a minimum set of tools. There's a complete workspace, and that's the one we're going to be using. There's a new Sea to Sky workspace for editing for aerial and underwater photo effects, and that's available only in the Ultimate version of PaintShop Pro. And there's a default PaintShop Pro workspace. The list of files here will change as you use the program. Let's go ahead and toggle on the complete version, and let's start a new document. When we select New Document, the New Image dialog box opens, and that provides us with a number of different blank canvases in different categories. There are user presets, there are photos, if you want to work on images that are primarily a particular photo size, like 8 by 10 or 16 by 20. There are blank canvases designed for different paper sizes, a lot of the European sizes, and also US legal, US letter size. There are blank canvases designed for designing web pages, and there's a list of these. Also, if you're going to be working on images for mobile applications, there are some blank canvases for Apple iPads, Google Pixel, Samsung, etc. There are a number of blank canvases for cards, business cards in different countries, DVD labels, envelopes, postcards, and more. If you're going to be creating images for social media, there are blank canvases designed for Facebook, Google, Twitter. But in our case, we're going to select the presentation option. For our example, we're going to select the 1024 by 768 pixel image. We could use a larger resolution image, but I'm using this to minimize the file size and speed up the rendering speed. Then we're going to use a raster background. We're going to use 8-bit color, and I'm going to turn off the transparency option for this example. And once I've made my selections, I can select OK. And this opens up PaintShop Pro to a blank canvas. The first time you open up PaintShop Pro, you may see a different opening display. This opening display has this organizer palette showing available images, and the path to these images can be adjusted, but we're going to turn that off. It also has a learning center that may appear on your display, and we're going to turn that off. We're going to get into the materials palette, and we're going to select the HSL option. And the HSL option provides a number of colors for foreground color and background color. More about that in a minute. There are actually 3 different material palette options. This first option gives us access to a bunch of colors, either in a standard palette or in a whole collection of different palettes. This option will work with grayscale, we're going to use the HSL materials option for selecting colors. Let's take a quick look now at the user interface. Starting with the top of the screen, we have the title bar, which shows us the application, shows us we're using the Edit tab. Next comes a menu bar. Below that is a toolbar. Below that is a tool options palette, and this is context sensitive. This area will change depending on what tool is selected. In this example, the paintbrush tool was selected, and so these are all options for the paintbrush tool. Down at the bottom of the screen, pay attention to this area. This is a tooltip area, and this will change depending on what tool is selected, and this will give you hints on how to use that tool. So the software is actually self-instructional. It has its built-in instructional tips as you select different tools from the tool column here. On the other side, bottom right, it shows you the image size of the current canvas, and there's our 1024 by 768. The menu bar option here has a user interface which will pop down different options. Let me return to the real program now, and here you see the menu bar with the user interface options. If I left click on that or select, I can pop out and choose the icon size. For purposes of the video, I chose the large icon size. I can also choose different text size, different scroll bar sizes, node sizes, workspace color. I already mentioned that I'm using the light gray color, and the background color I'm using medium gray. That's this area outside of the canvas. Let's go ahead and use the brush tool to draw a few lines. Right now, the size of my brush is 25. If I click on this, I have some preset buttons that I can use. And I've selected the round 25 brush. There are a lot more brushes. We'll get into those a little later. Once I select a brush, I can either go down and select OK, or I can just double click on that brush. And now let me look at the tooltip here. It says click and drag to paint with foreground, right click and drag to paint with background. Over here I have the foreground and I have the background colors displayed. Right now the foreground is black, so if I left click and drag, I'll be drawing with a black color. The background color is white right now. Let me change the background color. I'm going to right click on that background color and choose the red color. Now, if I draw with the right mouse button, I'll be drawing with the background color, which is red, or I can draw left mouse button, foreground, background, foreground, background. I could choose my color from the material selection palette here. If I click there, you'll see my foreground color now is a darker grayish red. If I right click here, I've changed the background color, foreground color, background color. If I want to get back to the default colors, I simply click here, send to black and white. Right below this color selection area is this rainbow. If I click at different parts of the rainbow, you'll see that my HSL palette is adjusted. So if I want to see ranges of green, I can click there, and now I can make my foreground color be something in the green range. And I can adjust that very subtly in the different brightness levels of green. There's another way to select colors, and let me do that by right-clicking in my foreground color, and that opens up recent materials, and it also opens up default set of colors. So I can get basic red, or I can get basic green, or right-click, basic blue, and so on. Just for fun, let me change the brush. We'll go up here to the brush selector and Clover Flow. I don't know what this is going to look like. Clover Flower. Double click on that, and I'm painting with a clover flower. You notice that each time I click, it cycles through a different size clover flower, and this cycling will be different for different brushes. I can also click and drag, and as I do that, it will cycle through the different size brushes for this particular brush. If I would choose a different brush, for example, let me choose this vertical line, and let me choose a blue color, and now I'm going to click and drag, and you notice how that particular brush works. Similarly, I could choose an angled brush, and let me choose a different color, and this would work if I'm trying to do calligraphy. This is getting awfully messy. I'm going to show you a trick to refresh the canvas here. I'm going to select everything in the canvas, and I'm going to do that by holding the Control key down and pressing the letter A. You may see this little dash line showing that I've selected the entire canvas, and now I'm going to press the Delete key on my keyboard. When I press the Delete key, what will happen is it'll take that whole selected area and change it to white, not always. Let me go up here and do Undo. Let me choose a different background color. Now you notice that I have black foreground, yellow background. Now when I press, now I've selected everything again, Control A. Now when I press Delete, I end up with the background color. The Delete key, when you make a selection, the Delete key will change what's in that selection to the current background color. Once I'm done with that, I want to get rid of this selection, so I'm going to hold the Control key down and press D, and now nothing's selected. Now I can go back and play around for a while with the different brushes. And you need to spend some time doing that just for fun. Change your colors, change your brushes. By the way, you can also change the size of the brushes here. Whoa, whoa. And you can change the style of the brushes. And new color. And you can just have all kinds of fun here with different colors and different kinds of brushes. Let me clear off my canvas here by doing Control A and Delete and Control D for no selection. And now I'm going to use a different tool. Instead of the brush tool, I'm going to use this preset shape tool. Notice that some of these tools have little arrows on the right side. If you click that arrow, you'll see that within that tool there are sub-tools available. For example, if I select the rectangle tool and then I click and drag, I'll get a rectangle. Might have a little bit of a hard time seeing that because it's actually used the blue color, the foreground color, for the stroke or the boundary line called stroke, and the fill is the current background color. So let me change the background color to red. Let me change the foreground color to black. And now when I make a rectangle, It's going to be red. Hard to see the black line, the stroke line, but I can actually change the width of the stroke line. I change it here to about 6 or 7 or 8. Well, 8. You see now the stroke and the fill. Stroke is foreground, fill is background. This rectangle tool can give you any size rectangle. However, if you hold the shift key down when you create a rectangle, no matter what you do, it's going to be constrained to a square. A similar thing happens if you use the ellipse tool. Let's choose a different foreground and a different background for the ellipse tool. Now if I hold the shift key down, I'll be constrained to a circle. If I don't hold the shift key down, I can make any funny color ellipse. There are also symmetrical shapes available. And remember, this tool area is context sensitive, so that once I've selected a particular tool, this area will change. And in this tool, I can choose between a polygon, and right now it's set to be a 9-sided polygon. I can change that to a 4-sided polygon. It looks a lot like a square, doesn't it? A 3-sided polygon, or maybe a 6-sided polygon. Or if I choose this, I get kind of a star-shaped thing. And again, the stroke is foreground, the fill is background. This little tool right here, by the way, allows me to switch those. I'm going to go back to the standard default colors, and I'm going to clear this off again so that I can play with something else. Let me stay with the symmetrical shape tool with a star shape, and let me create something now that has stroke, foreground, fill, background. This time, instead of filling with a color, I'm going to left click in the background area, and that gives me the material properties dialog box, and I can choose colors. If I choose something here, I can go and choose anything around this color wheel option, but I'm going to switch to a gradient fill, and now I have a whole collection of gradient fill options. Let me choose this autumn forest fill, and in the gradient fill options I have the option to do a sunburst, a rectangular, or linear gradient fill. Let's do the sunburst. OK. So you see black foreground, gradient background. Now when I create a star, you'll notice that it's filled with this different background. There's another trick I can use. These are vector objects, by the way, as opposed to raster objects. And vector objects are scalable, where raster objects are created with a bunch of little picture elements. Let me create a few miscellaneous objects here, just for variety. And now what I want to do is I want to select the pick tool. And the pick tool allows me to pick any one of the vector objects. And once I've picked that object, I can double click on it. And when I double click, it will open up the vector property dialog box. And you notice that this is a reproduction of foreground and background. However, it gives me direct access to the stroke size, and to the fill, and I can choose a different fill. And now when I say OK, you notice that I've changed that existing vector object. And so once I've selected a vector object, I have the power to change the foreground or the stroke and the stroke and the fill of an object that's already been created. If you were paying attention over here, you notice that we not only have this rainbow to change the HSL area, but we also have a whole list of recently used colors. So if we want to go back to some we had recently, we can very easily click left or right, and then using the pick tool, I can double click on that and go from there and adjust things in a hurry. Let me clean this off again by selecting everything. Better change my background to white. Deleting, Control D. Let me explore one other option in this tool area, and that's preset shape. Now when I click here, I'll get a whole list of preset shapes. The number of preset shapes that appear will depend on whether you have the default PaintShop 2021 installation or the Ultimate installation, or whether you've downloaded the extra creative content options. So here I can choose a pointing finger. Let me just drag out a big pointing finger here. And once again, I can use the pick tool, double click, change the stroke width, and change the fill color, something else. Okay, but what I'm going to do, this is still a vector object, right? And with vector objects, when they're selected, you can use these little grab points to change the size and shape. You can even use this to rotate the vector object, but I'm going to convert that to a raster object. So I'm going to say layers, merge all, flatten. And now I no longer have a vector object, I have a bitmapped object, and that will give me an opportunity to demonstrate this flood fill tool. Let me go in here and choose the red color for the background and flood fill there. Whoops, that was a left click, right click for red. Let me choose white and flood fill that white. And for the hand, I would like some kind of flesh color. This gives me an opportunity to demonstrate this other material selection palette. Instead of standard, I'm going to go down here and what am I going to choose? I'm going to choose skin. And that gives me a whole bunch of different possible skin tones. And now I can flood fill that with a skin tone. When I use flood fill and click in an area, it will look and look and look, and it'll fill in everything until it gets to a boundary line of a significantly different color. If I decide to use a pattern color, and I have a whole list of patterns here to choose from. I don't know what would be good on that guy's shirt sleeve. It says nature. I have a whole bunch of different collections. Let me look at all of the patterns. And let me go down here and use, I don't know, funny thing for a shirt color. Okay. Now I'll fill that shirt with that foreground color. If I choose a gradient fill, let me left click in my background area, choose gradient, and this time I'm going to not use a rectangular, but I'm going to use the radial gradient. And what will I find here? Maybe this one. Okay. And now when I flood fill here with the background color, it will fill around, but it doesn't fill anything here. unless it finds a hole in this line, and then it will cross over. You'll see that again later when we get into some other examples. The text tool in PaintShop Pro can be used to create signs or add text to photos or other graphic images. When the text tool is selected, the context toolbar changes to text formatting tools that are similar to most word processing programs. Once you've entered some text, then you must use the Apply Changes tool to finalize that. Once I select the text tool, I use the context toolbar to set the font, the size, the style, the alignment. I can set the font color. Remember that the font color is the same as the background color. And I can set the stroke width and the stroke color. The stroke color is the same as the foreground color. Once I've adjusted those settings, I can left click and type some text. When I'm finished entering my text, I select the Apply Changes tool. And notice that when you add text, it adds it as a vector object. And vector objects can be edited as long as this text is selected and the text tool is selected. I can double click in the text and I can actually highlight any part of the text and make changes. Or I can even highlight just one character in the text and make a change. I can even change the color of a single character. And I can change the stroke characteristics of one or more characters. And when I'm done editing the text, I select the Apply tool. When this text is selected, I can use the grab bars to move the text around, or to drag a grab point and change the size, or if I like, I can rotate the text. In order to help make text stand out from backgrounds, it's helpful to use a drop shadow from time to time. Let's see how the drop shadow can be applied to text. First, we'll select the text tool, select our font, color, stroke, and then add some text. And once we're done editing our text, we'll apply that text and position it wherever we like on the screen. And now to add the drop shadow, we'll select from the menu bar, Effects, 3D Effects, Drop Shadow. Now remember that when we add text, it adds it to a vector layer. However, when we want a drop shadow, we have to convert that vector layer to a raster layer. And this prompt will come up and remind you of that. If you're always going to do the same thing, you can toggle this option. We'll leave the prompt to me before taking these actions option on just as a reminder. We'll select OK. And now the drop shadow dialog box opens. And in this dialog box, I want to make sure that we're previewing on the image so we can see what happens. In this dialog box, we have the power to adjust the offsets, vertical, horizontal. Let me just dramatically change these just to see how it works. I can actually have a negative number there and have the drop shadow to the left instead of to the right in the horizontal direction. Then I can adjust the opacity. The more opacity, the darker the shadow is, or if I lower it, I get a very faint shadow. And let me run that up. And then I can add blur. You see what happens when I add blur to the thing. You can also adjust the color of your drop shadow. So there are all kinds of things that you can apply in the drop shadow dialog box. There are actually some preset drop shadows that you can select from. There's above wide to the left, and you can mess with that position and do all kinds of things. If you have a drop shadow that you use frequently, you can go in and change your drop shadow parameters. And you can actually add those settings to one of the presets. And you can make a whole collection of drop shadows that you use frequently. Once the parameters are set, you say OK. One of the options we have for dealing with text is that we can modify the text layer. I'm going to copy and paste an image from the sample pages, and remember, on the YouTube video, if you scroll down, you'll find information on how to get this sample image. For this example, I'm going to go to the sample image book, and I'm going to select the clouds image. I'll first select it. I'll right click, copy the image, go back to Paint Shop, and select Edit, Paste as New Image. And now I'm going to add some text to this image. Then I will apply the changes to the text, and I'm going to just drag the text to a new location here. And remember, when you add text, it adds a new vector layer. Well, I think I'd rather have this text have a red color for the font. Now remember, when I have multiple layers, I can use the Pick tool to select different layers. I've selected the text layer, and now I'm going to have a little bit of fun here. I'm going to select Effects, 3D Effects, Inner Bevel, and it reminds me it has to change this to a raster layer. Okay. And now I get the Inner Bevel dialog box. And this dialog box provides me a large variety of different bevels that I can apply to the current selection. And you should experiment with these just to see what they look like and which one you might prefer. Once you have selected the bevel and all of its characteristics, you can say OK. And now I'm going to right click on this text and select Properties. The Layer Properties dialog box provides a large variety of blend modes that we can apply. Make sure that we have the Preview on Image option turned on, and then we can explore some of these overlay modes just to see what they do. Notice how it affects the clouds versus the text. I'm going to go down and choose the overlay mode and say OK. And once again, I'm going to right click and look at the properties. And in the Layer Properties dialog box, I have several tabs. I have blend ranges. I can adjust these things. You can play around with the different color and grade channels if you like, but we're going to look at layer styles, and I'm going to select the bevel style and see what happens. You can also mess with other characteristics here. And as you explore the different options, you can see the effect on the preview. Okay, now with these two layers overlaid, you see what happens was I drag that over different parts of the cloud, how the overlay works. When we have the text selected, take a look at the context sensitive tool area, and notice that we can manually adjust different parameters here, including perspective in the X and Y directions. What happens if I set the X perspective to a larger number? See how that's moving away from us? I can also drag these things and change the thing by using the grabbers. I could also, let me undo that. I can also change a perspective in the Y direction. And I can use that Star Wars type approach to fly things around here, make them look like they're receding into the background. I can adjust the shear. You just have to experiment with these numbers to see what it's actually doing. And you can play around with the grabbers and adjust things, including rotating the text if you like. So there are a lot of options to mess with when you're adding a text layer to a drawing. The next tool to explore is something called the text cutter. To explore that, we need another graphic image on the display. I'm going to copy and paste another image from the sample pages, and remember, on the YouTube video, if you scroll down, you'll find information on how to get this sample image. I'm going to jump ahead to the Figure 19 tulips image. I'll select that with the left mouse button, then I'll right click and say copy the image. Then I'll jump back to PaintShop Pro and select edit, paste as a new image. And then I'm going to add some text to this image. I'm going to apply that change, and then I'm going to drag this around a little bit and make it larger to demonstrate the point here. Okay. Now, with the text tool selected, on the context toolbar, you will find the text cutter tool. So I'm going to select that, and what happens is it cut that chunk of text out and created a new image. Notice I have two images now on the screen. I created a new image with a transparent background, and I think what I'll do just to demonstrate this is I'm going to add on this new image, I'm going to add a drop shadow. 3D effects, drop shadow, and in this case I'm going to set this pretty dramatic just for the illustration. So okay, now I've got this image. Now let's see how I can use this image. Let me open up a new blank canvas, and I think I'll color this blank canvas by using the flood fill tool, and I'm going to use one of my gradient fills and that gives me something to work on here. Now I'm going to go back to this new text cutter image, and I'm going to copy it. Control C, go to my new colorful image and paste it. Edit, paste as a transparent selection. And there I have it. So you see how you can use a text cutter tool to carve out text and fill the text with something from a background image. Remember, we started with this image, and when we added the text to it, the area of the image that was covered by the text was actually cut away, and then we could use that image any way we like. In this case, I put a drop shadow on it, and then I pasted it onto a new image. I could paste this any place. I could use this to paste it on a photograph if I'm making signs or whatever. Lots of fun with a text cutter tool. There's one more text trick to cover in this section of the video, and that's to get text to follow a curved line. So I've created a new blank canvas here, and now I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to select the freehand version, and then I'm just going to drag out a curved line of some sort here. Okay, now let me choose text. Let me set the font size. Maybe I'll try 28, and Arial, that's fine. Maybe make it bold. Okay, now this is where I have to be careful. Ordinarily when I place the text, it will be wherever I put the cursor and click. Now, if I get right on that curved line, watch what happens. See how that cursor changes when I get right on the curved line to that little curvy T? Now when I click and add the text will follow the curved line. Now I can use the pick tool and select that, and I can drag that around. I can change the size of it by dragging the edges here. Maybe even stretch it up and down. That's a little strange when I stretch it too much. So you get the idea that we can put text on a curved line. I can also go back, choose the text tool, and if I get the cursor in the right place, I can double click on this, and I can edit my text. Let's just move that a little bit, and I can actually make it a different size, so I can play around with the text size, although it gets a little strange depending on the curve and the size of your text font. So, text on a curved line, another tool to add to your Paint Shop Pro 2021 toolkit. Picture tubes are a great thing to have fun with, and the picture tubes allow you to be creative without being a professional artist. Let's see how they work here. I'm going to select the picture tube tool, and then on the context sensitive toolbar, I'll choose from a collection of picture tubes. Now, my collection is probably a lot bigger than yours, but if yours is a minimum set of picture tubes, you should go back to the Corel store and download and install the free Creative Content that will add picture tubes and other things to your collection. So, how do I use a picture tube? Well, I just go and find something here. I like to play with butterflies, and these things are kind of in alphabetical order, so I should be able to find a butterfly collection here someplace. Let's see, bugs, butterflies. Okay, select butterflies. Now I'm just going to go here and click someplace and I'll get a butterfly. Click again and I get another butterfly. And the size of these butterflies is controlled by the scale function. And how they're placed can be either random or it can be continuous. Some of these picture tubes have more image than others. When you use a continuous option for the full-scale butterflies, it gets a little messy real fast. Let me reduce the scale. And now let me put some smaller butterflies. Let me click and drag. And you notice how the butterflies are coming in. It'll be easier to see that if I would use my Control A, delete, Control D trick to get a fresh canvas here. Now you see these are coming in a continuous way rather than random. And the selection mode can be random or angular or incremental. There are all these options to experiment with. Now, if we choose this settings tool, you'll get a dialog box that will tell you about this particular picture tube. This butterfly picture tube has 3 cells across and 4 down and a total of 12 cells. The current step size is 300. The current scale size is 43. The cell width and height are set here. The placement mode. All of this is saved in the picture tube settings for each picture tube. So if I was to clear this off again and choose a different picture tube, let's just choose the gold. Now if I check settings on that, you notice that there's only 1 cell over, 1 cell down. They're all cells. Tells me the width, step size, tells me the scale. And now if I click and drag for this one, they're very close together, although I can click one at a time. So each of these picture tubes behaves in a different way. So the challenge for you is to somehow create a nice picture using the different picture tubes. Let me just fool around here a little bit. Right now it's showing all of my picture tubes. If I go to the nature selection, I can find some grass. So I'll put some grass here. Oh, that's a big grass. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to change the scale of this one to be about 12. Why not? And I'll put some grass across here. A little bit of grass here, a little bit of grass there. I'm going to change the scale up a little bit. And put some more grass in. And my idea is the closer the grass is to me, the larger the grass should look. Let me do it one more time. Let's try 75. I don't know. I'm just experimenting with these numbers now, just having some fun. Now let me try another one. Let me try a water patch. Let me drop the scale of that down and put some water over here. I've got a pond over here on the edge of the grass somehow. And I'm going to add some trees. Better start with some small trees. Put some small trees back over here. And put some trees around the edge of the pond here. Whoops, got trees growing right in the pond. Well, you get the idea. You can have a lot of fun with this. Let me up the scale of the trees. And put a couple more trees in here. Put one in here. Let me put a big old tree right on the edge of my picture. too big. Farther over this way. And another one right about there. I don't like it. I'm going to move that over just a little bit. Okay, you get the idea. Now, what I would like to demonstrate is, through the use of this, is to mess around with this area here. Multiple ways to do it. First of all, I'm going to copy this whole image, and then I'm going to paste it as a new image. I want to keep this other one in the background, so I have two identical images. This one I'm going to play with. If I use the flood fill tool and I choose a blue gradient color, what happens with the flood fill, depending on the tolerance that's set, is it'll start with the color of the pixel where you click on, and then it's going to fill until it runs into something, and it'll stop filling, and it'll fill around these edges. If you set the tolerance to something like 20, and then say flood fill, and then I zoom in here, you can see what happens. See all these little pixels? If I wanted to fill this background in, I could go in and fill every one of those white areas. And if I set the tolerance a lot higher, click in that same area, you see how it kind of overlaps into the other edges there a bit. But that still leaves a lot of holes in my sky. There's another way to make a sky. Let me go find a sky picture. I went and I copied and pasted the clouds that we used once before when we were experimenting with text. Now I'm going to go to this image, not the one I messed with, but I'm going to go back to the original, and I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to go over here to the clouds, and I'm going to say paste as transparent image, as a transparent selection. And now I've got to get this lined up just right because they're both the same size. And now I'm going to say select none. You see all this raggedy stuff is the edge of my original. Remember? See, when I copied this and then I pasted it onto the clouds, the white part of this is going to be transparent, and the clouds will show through that part, and I no longer need to have it selected, so I'm going to say selections, none. And if I zoom in here, you can see how that works. There's still some pixelation there. I've got a way to improve on that. I'm going to use this tool over here, which is called the soften tool. And let me I'm going to hold the Alt key down and drag the mouse, make that tool a little smaller. And now I can soften all this, and what happens is that gets rid of some of that pixelation on the edges there. Let me zoom in so you can see what's happening here. Watch when I soften this. You see it gets blurry, but the blurriness gets rid of those jaggies on the pixelated part of the image. And so with hardly any work at all, I can be an artist and create some interesting pictures using the fun picture tube tool. Let's take a little closer look at the flood fill tool. I've created a new image and I've just put a couple of shapes on here to illustrate the flood fill tool. Here's the flood fill tool. And the flood fill tool will fill everything until it runs into an edge. And I can fill either with a foreground color or the background color. Let me set the foreground color to blue. Let me set the background color to green. Ooh, it filled right inside of that. Let me undo and show you why. First of all, we need to look up here at the context toolbar. The flood fill tool has a tolerance And if the tolerance is set high enough, and if it finds a hole, look right here, there's a little hole there. And if it finds a hole, it'll leak right out of there and fill everything else. If I set the tolerance low enough, it doesn't leak out. And that's because if I really zoom in here, you see that this isn't pure white all across there. It's a little bit gray in that area. If I wanted to fix that, if I want to patch that hole, I could use my paintbrush and set the paintbrush to black and set the paintbrush size really small, down to nothing, down to 1. And now I can draw here with black, and that patches the hole. So now when I use the flood fill tool, go back to this blue color. No, let me use a different color. Let me use some kind of gold for this crown. And the flood fill now will stay inside there because it's not finding any holes. The flood fill tool can use solid colors, or it can use any of the other materials. If I click here and I choose gradient, and then I set the gradient to, hard to read that with my large thing, sunburst. I've enlarged this cursor for the videos. And then I go down here and I find let's find a yellowish foregroundy gradient fill. Okay, I'm going to flood fill inside that light bulb. And if I flood fill inside the crown, you notice a slight difference there. So flood fills can use gradients. Flood fills can also use patterns. And if I find a strange pattern here, fish. Don't know why I'm using fish, but I can fill everything here with fish. And if I undo that and I go and I change, I have to go back to the gradient fill to change the scale of that particular pattern. And then I say flood fill, it'll fill with that. Also, more about the gradient fill, I can change the angle so that the fish are slanty, or the feet are slanty, or whatever I'm using here. But notice again, the flood fill goes and fills until it finds an edge, and then it stops. And if the tolerance is very high, it will go right through some of the grayest edges instead of finding solid colors. So, get a little bit of an idea of using the flood fill here. Now, trying to change this flood fill to a different color rather than a gradient. So I need to go back to color and choose my color. And then I can flood fill with a color inside there. So there are a couple of other things to see on the flood fill context menu. There's the tolerance. You can use RGB or color or brightness. There are different things to experiment with there. There is a blend mode, which can be any of a number of things. And there's lots to experiment with blend modes. Opacity, again, if you want to have low opacity and make this more of a transparent fill, you can do that. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Why did it do that? If I zoom in here, notice that this is not a solid color. So when I flood fill, it clicked on that particular color, and because the tolerance is 0, it only fills things that it finds next to it that are 0 tolerance. If I do that same thing with a higher tolerance, it'll fill a lot more. Here it even leaked out into that other area. So lots of experimenting to do with flood fills.